Well, good morning. Happy Friday to you. My goodness, it's good to have you with us here on the Market Day Report as we get prepared for the final trading session of this week. Well, along with me, I have the one and only Brian Hoops. He is the president of Midwest Market Solutions, and he comes to us from Springfield, Missouri. Now, Brian, as I was getting ready to come into the studio, USDA sent a little message out, and it had one of those overnight flash export sales. I want to take a look at the numbers involved in this one. And I say numbers plural. Yeah, there was not just one, there was not two, but count them, 3 overnight export sales. Interesting. So let's start out with the biggest one. We had a sale of corn. It was 165,000 tons of corn to unknown destinations. Now, we had a sale of soybeans again to China. This time, the amount was 136,000 tons. And then we had a sale of soft red wheat once again to China again. So that makes, I believe, 4 out of 6 days or something like that, 4 out of 5. 110,000 tons this time around. So now I'm sure we're over 1 million tons that are sold to China here in the last week. Brian, any initial thoughts on these numbers? Were they a surprise or not?
Hey, Marlon, good morning. You know, these numbers are a little bit of a surprise, I think, to the trade just from the sheer amounts of the sale of wheat. You know, next week's export sales will reflect this week's private sale announcements. As you said, going to be well over 1 million tons of wheat, going to be easily a marking near high. And this is more than what the trade had been hearing as far as rumors, 4 to 6 cargoes, well above that amount. The soybean sales just keep coming as well. You know, again, these are hedges against that South American production, so I don't think that's a surprise to the trade. But a corn sale had not been really rumored in the marketplace. We heard some rumors that maybe China had switched from some cargoes several days ago from Brazil to U.S. origin. So this is possibly part of that rumor mill. But again, these numbers I think are supportive for the trade today, especially when you have the supply and demand report coming out. Likely to see the continuation of some short covering that we saw start yesterday into the morning hours before the report comes out.
Okay, so let's take a look then at our overnight trade. And this would have closed up. The Globex trade would have closed before these new overnight export sales numbers came out. So be aware of that. Now, on the corn, we did finish up with that March contract 1 3/4 higher at 489 3/4. You know, that was only 1 tick from its high last night. Now, in soybeans, this is how we fared. We had the January up 11. It was at 13.22 3/4. So now we are way beyond that $13 benchmark that we had trouble clearing earlier. And now the March contract is up 10.5 this morning at 13.40 3/4. So Brian, in your opinion, and by the way, the March is within a penny of its high from overnight. In your opinion, is most of the volume in January or is it out in March now?
Yeah, you know, there's still a lot of volume in the January contract for soybeans. Some of it has rolled to March, but primarily until we get closer to the middle of the month, we'll see at least another week of a lot of trade and a lot of interest in that January contract before we start talking about deliveries at the end of the month. A lot of this export news that you've talked about, and yesterday we talked about weekly export sales being very strong, was predicated by a fall in the U.S. dollar. Now, this morning, the dollar is sharply higher following the non-farm payrolls report number that came out. And we've seen a dollar rally over the last week from the 102.35 area up above 104 here this morning. That is going to cut into some of these exports. So these are great to see, a good start to see, for our week, but maybe short-lived with that dollar moving higher. It probably is going to start to slow our export business down. So we definitely need a better U.S. dollar, cheaper U.S. dollar. You can see it really prompts some export business when we have that cheaper dollar.
A lot of times it has a dramatic effect, or it can, on the wheat, and the wheat is lower in Chicago overnight. March down 3 3/4 at 638.5. Now, again, I'll remind you, this is before we got this new overnight sales announcement of more wheat sold to China, even though it wasn't that large of an amount. Kansas City wheat last night, March was down 3/4, and just a row of sixes, 666 3/4. Now, on spring wheat trade, we had the March contract 1 3/4 lower at 735.5. And you know, that cotton market really perked up here lately. And here this morning, you have the March contract now 29 points lower, but it's still at 82.30. So, boy, they gained back a lot of ground. Last night, it actually got up to 83.13. And that's quite a rally it has staged here in the last week or so. Maybe taking a little bit of a breather here early this morning. We'll pause here and we'll talk more with Brian Hoops in just a moment. And we'll take a look at that livestock trade today after this. We're back talking with Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. Well, right before the break, we were talking about the things that could be impacting the grain trade today. And I didn't even bring up the WASDE report that'll be coming out at noon Eastern time. Tammy alluded to it earlier, but yeah, noon Eastern, we'll have live coverage right here. This is one of those reports, Brian, that most analysts that I speak with say, yeah, it often gets overlooked, you know, in December. Doesn't have that much data that can change. Is that the way you feel about it or not?
From a production standpoint, yes. You know, we don't update any corn, soybeans, or wheat production numbers here in the U.S. in this report. That'll be saved for next month. But South American production is updated, and I think that's what everybody's going to closely be watching. Ending stocks in the U.S. are probably just going to have very minimal changes as far as the demand goes for corn, soybeans, and wheat. But you can see some nice swings from the USDA as far as South American corn and soybean production. The CONAB was out earlier this week. They lowered their estimate of the Brazil's corn crop and soybean crop by 1 to 2 million tons. We'll see if the USDA kind of follows along with that, or if they hold more of a slow approach that they don't want to lower yields quite yet. But trade, you know, is expecting to see a small cut in production of both corn and soybeans in Brazil, because especially that dry area in the northern Brazil, where it's been extremely dry and forcing some replanting to take place.
Let's recap where we finished on the livestock trade yesterday. And boy, it's been a crazy week in livestock. Yesterday on live cattle, the quotes from bar charts showed we had February down $1.02. We finished at 162.52. On the feeder cattle yesterday, we had the January up 12, but everything else lower. March was down 57. Wow, look at the deferreds. August down $2.32, way out there. On lean hogs yesterday, you had the February contract $1.52 lower at 67.77. It wasn't that stellar of a day yesterday. Do you think the markets here will react to the WASDE report in any way today?
Unlikely as far as the livestock market goes. I think, Marlon, you know, we're focused on more of the negative fundamentals in the cattle, packer margins in the red, because cutout values just seemingly cannot rally. Steer weights at record levels yesterday, 940 pounds, new all-time record for our steer weights. So you have maybe less supply, but you have bigger supplies that meets the packers' needs at this time. So, you know, we're extremely oversold. The discount the futures are holding to the current cash markets in both feeders and in fats is really the only positive that you can see out there at this time, other than seasonals, which are trying to turn higher. You know, right today or Monday, they start to seemingly turn higher, and we normally have a rally in the cattle market. So I know a lot of people are hoping that seasonal holds true this year.
Interesting stuff. Thank you, Brian, for talking with us, and I hope you have a great weekend out there.
You too. Thank you.
That's Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. A quick look. I did want to touch on crude oil trade because it's moving overnight. It's up $1.39. Just want you to be aware we're at 73 per barrel on the January. And Tammy, I know how you love to see much higher oil prices as much time as you spend on the road.
Oh, yeah. Fun to fill up.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up there. So
thanks for that update. Appreciate it, Marlon.